My stepdaughter yelled, "You're not my dad. Stop telling me how to spend my money while spending mine." I replied, "Okay," then I blocked her allowance and cut off her access to everything else. Her freedom lasted exactly 13 hours. I, 42M, thought I knew what parenting looked like until my wife remarried me 3 years ago and brought her 17-year-old daughter into our lives. What started as small disagreements about household rules had escalated into something I never saw coming. The breaking point happened on a Tuesday evening when I came home from work to find luxury shopping bags scattered across the living room. Designer clothes, expensive makeup, and what looked like a brand new laptop sat among the chaos. My stepdaughter lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone with the casual indifference that had become her trademark. I asked her about the purchases, keeping my voice level. She barely looked up as she explained that she'd gone shopping with friends after school. When I mentioned that we'd agreed on a monthly spending limit, her expression shifted to something between annoyance and defiance. She reminded me that her mother had given her permission to use the credit card for school supplies. I pointed out that designer jeans and a gaming laptop didn't exactly qualify as school necessities. That's when her voice rose, cutting through the tension like a blade. She told me I wasn't her father and had no right to control how she spent her money. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and final. I stood there for a moment, processing what she'd just said, then replied with a simple acknowledgement. I told her she was absolutely right. The confusion that flickered across her face almost made me reconsider what I was about to do. Almost. But I'd spent 3 years trying to build a relationship with someone who clearly saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM with house rules. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was remove her as an authorized user from all my credit cards. Then I changed the passwords on all the streaming services, canceled her phone plan upgrade to basic, and removed her access to the car insurance policy for the vehicle she'd been driving. My wife was working late that evening, so I had time to think through each decision. I wasn't acting out of anger, surprisingly. It felt more like finally accepting reality. If I wasn't her father, then I didn't have father responsibilities towards someone who was essentially a stranger living in my house. I called my financial advisor and had him remove her college fund contributions from my automatic transfers. The money I'd been setting aside monthly would go back into our general savings. I also contacted the phone company and changed her unlimited plan to a basic one with limited data and no international features. By the time my wife came home around 10, I was sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, feeling oddly peaceful about the whole situation. My wife asked about the shopping bags still scattered in the living room. I explained what had happened and what I'd done in response. Her initial reaction was to defend her daughter, but when I repeated the exact words about not being her father, something shifted in her expression. She asked if I was serious about cutting everything off. I told her I was simply respecting her daughter's wishes. If I wasn't her father, then I couldn't be expected to provide fatherly support. It was only logical. We talked until nearly midnight. My wife tried to find middle ground, suggesting that her daughter was just being a typical teenager testing boundaries. I agreed, but pointed out that typical teenagers don't usually have access to unlimited credit cards and luxury privileges without any corresponding responsibilities. The next morning started early. My stepdaughter came downstairs ready for school, grabbed the car keys from the hook by the door, and headed for the garage. I was eating breakfast when I heard her footsteps return, much faster this time. She asked why the car wouldn't start. I explained that I'd had it towed to the dealership for maintenance. She could take the bus to school like most kids her age. Her frustration was immediate and visible. She asked how she was supposed to get around without a car. I suggested walking, public transportation, or asking friends for rides. The same options available to teenagers whose non-fathers couldn't provide vehicles. She tried calling an Uber, but her phone kept declining the payment. That's when she realized her phone plan had been changed. No more unlimited data, no more premium features. Just basic calling and texting. I watched her face cycle through confusion, anger, and the dawning realization that yesterday's declaration had consequences she hadn't anticipated. She demanded to know what I'd done to her accounts. I calmly listed each change: credit cards, phone plan, car access, streaming services, and the college fund contributions. I explained that these were all things fathers provided for their children, and since she'd made it clear I wasn't her father, it only made sense to adjust accordingly. The bus arrived outside, and she had no choice but to run to catch it, still processing what had just happened. My wife called me during lunch, her voice strained. She'd received multiple texts from her daughter throughout the morning, each one more panicked than the last. The reality of teenage life without unlimited resources was setting in quickly. Her daughter had tried to buy lunch at school only to discover that her usual payment method no longer worked. She'd attempted to stream music during study hall, but found herself locked out of all the premium services. The laptop she'd bought the day before was essentially useless without the Wi-Fi password I'd changed. My wife asked if I thought I was being too harsh. I reminded her that I was simply honoring her daughter's request. She'd wanted independence from my parental authority, and I was giving her exactly that. The afternoon brought more complications. Her daughter's after-school plans fell through when she couldn't afford the coffee shop hangout her friends had planned. The study group she was supposed to join required online access she no longer had unrestricted use of. By evening, she was home earlier than usual, having discovered that teenage social life required more financial resources than she'd realized. She found me in the living room and asked if we could talk. Her tone was different now, less defiant and more uncertain. She wanted to know if the changes were permanent. I told her that depended entirely on what kind of relationship she wanted us to have. If she wanted to continue seeing me as just her mother's husband with no parental authority, then this was how things would remain. But if she was willing to acknowledge that family relationships came with both privileges and responsibilities, we could discuss alternatives. She asked what I meant by responsibilities. I explained that in most families, teenagers contributed to household tasks, followed reasonable rules about spending and behavior, and showed basic respect for the adults providing for them. Her next question surprised me. She wanted to know if I'd really been putting money away for her college. I confirmed that I'd been contributing to a fund for her education since her mother and I married, but that I'd stopped the automatic transfers yesterday. The silence stretched between us as she processed this information. Finally, she asked what would happen if she apologized. I told her that apologies were a good start, but rebuilding trust required consistent actions over time. Words were easy, but proving she understood the connection between respect and support would take effort. She asked if she could have her phone plan back first. I explained that privileges would return gradually, based on demonstrated responsibility. Basic phone service would continue, but extras would need to be earned. That evening, for the first time in months, she helped clear the dinner table without being asked. Small gesture, but I noticed. Update 1. 3 days later, the changes were becoming more apparent. My stepdaughter had started walking to school instead of expecting rides, and her after-school activities had shifted to free options like the library study groups instead of expensive coffee shops. She'd also begun asking before using anything that might cost money. When she wanted to order takeout with friends, she actually asked if it was okay to use the credit card and showed me the total first. My wife was torn between feeling proud of her daughter's growing responsibility and worried that I was being too strict. I reminded her that nothing I'd done was unreasonable by most family standards. I'd simply removed the unusual privileges that had made our household different from most. The real test came when her daughter's friends invited her to a weekend shopping trip to the city. She came to me directly, explained what the trip would involve, and asked if there was a way she could go. I told her we could discuss it, but she'd need to contribute somehow. I suggested she could earn money for the trip by taking on additional household responsibilities or finding ways to help with family tasks. She agreed immediately, which surprised me. For the next week, she vacuumed, did laundry, organized closets, and even helped with yard work without complaint. When the weekend arrived, I gave her a reasonable amount for the shopping trip and restored her phone data for the day so she could stay in contact. Her excitement was genuine, and for the first time since I'd known her, she thanked me like she actually meant it. Update 2. 2 weeks into the new arrangement, something unexpected happened. My stepdaughter started asking me for advice. It began with simple questions about money management. She wanted to understand how credit cards worked and why spending had limits. Then she asked about college costs and how families typically save for education. I found myself explaining concepts I'd never thought she'd be interested in learning. Budgeting, compound interest, the difference between needs and wants. She listened with attention I'd never seen from her before. She also started including me in conversations about her future plans. College choices, potential careers, summer job possibilities. These weren't topics we'd ever discussed when she saw me as just her mother's husband. My wife noticed the change too. Our dinner conversations became actual family discussions instead of her daughter updating her mother while ignoring my presence. The breakthrough moment came when she asked if I'd help her apply for a part-time job at a local bookstore. She wanted to start earning her own money for the things she wanted beyond basic necessities. I spent an entire Saturday helping her write a resume, practice interview skills, and understand what employers looked for in teenage workers. When she got the job a week later, her hug of thanks felt genuine for the first time. Update 3. A month after that Tuesday evening confrontation, our household had settled into something that actually felt like a family dynamic. My stepdaughter had earned back most of her privileges through consistent responsibility and respect. Her phone plan was upgraded. She had limited access to streaming services, and she could use a credit card for approved expenses. The car situation remained unchanged. I decided that driving was a privilege that required demonstrating maturity over a longer period. She accepted this without argument and had actually started saving money from her job toward eventually getting her own vehicle. What surprised me most was how our relationship had evolved. She started coming to me with problems she would have only discussed with her mother before. School stress, friend drama, anxiety about college applications. I found myself giving advice and support in ways that felt natural. She also defended our family rules when friends complained about their restrictions. I overheard her explaining to someone that rules weren't punishment. They were structure that helped families function. The real validation came during a family dinner when my wife mentioned feeling proud of the young woman her daughter was becoming. My stepdaughter looked directly at me and said she was grateful for everything I taught her about responsibility and respect. She acknowledged that calling me not her dad had been wrong, not because she needed to see me as her father, but because she'd been disrespectful to someone who'd been trying to help her grow up successfully. I told her that earning respect was a two-way process, and she'd shown me that she was capable of handling both freedom and responsibility. 3 months later, she asked if I'd walk her at her high school graduation ceremony, since her biological father wouldn't be attending. The request meant more to me than any luxury purchase or grand gesture could have. Sometimes the best way to teach someone about family is to show them what life looks like without it, then give them the choice to build something better together. The 13 hours she'd spent realizing that independence without support systems was harder than she'd imagined had been enough to start a conversation that changed our entire family dynamic. Looking back, I realized that my calm response to her declaration hadn't been about punishment or revenge. It had been about respecting her stated wishes while creating space for her to understand what family relationships actually meant. Some lessons can only be learned through experience, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow someone to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Today, she's in college on a scholarship she earned through her own hard work, supplemented by the education fund I'd resumed contributing to after she'd proven her commitment to our family relationship. She calls me weekly, asks for advice regularly, and includes me in her major decisions. The girl who once told me I wasn't her father now introduces me to her college friends as her dad. Not because I demanded it, but because she chose it after understanding what that relationship actually meant.